My name's Justin Hayward from Cambridge Investment Research, and I've written reports with PIRA, which is the global print research company based in the UK. And today I'm going to talk to you about digital textiles. We wrote a report through some research in the middle and towards the end of last year, and I'll just be updating that and telling you about some of the results. So what I'll talk about today, just to take you through it, an introduction to the report and the company. We'll do a very quick market overview, looking at participants in the market, the drivers and applications. We'll put some charts up of some market sizes and growth rates that we got from the research, and in particular direct primary research with, I think it was 47, just under 50 market participants. And some concluding remarks at the end of that. So this is just a very quick slide about PIRA. As I said, I've been writing reports for them over the years on various topics, but PIRA is a global network of associates, consultants, freelancers and experts to a worldwide customer base. And I suppose the dots represent customers there. 3 information hubs, Europe and the US. And the focus has been, I think PIRA was bought by a chemicals company more recently, hence Smithers PIRA. But it's printing, paper and packaging, and different kinds of packaging there, food contact. Just a few words about me. If you'd like to link in, I'm delighted to link in with everyone here. My Twitter handle is Hayward CIR, and we run conferences as well. So you can follow HVM conference, and I'll mention something we're doing in November in Cambridge. Some academic qualifications, but for my sins I worked in the city as an investment banker for 4 years at Deutsche Bank in the late 90s. Written this recent report, Digital Textiles Printing. And I've also written about inkjet printing, packaging, labels, inks, and other areas, printed electronics. And we do consulting work directly for single client companies in printing, direct to pack, and smart. And I'm actually on at 3:30 talking about direct to pack in the hall next door at 3:30. So yeah, I won't go into detail there. I think I've mentioned all those. Some other reports that have been written and that I've been involved in. This is about the update to the Digital Textiles report. There's one from 2012, and this was written in late 2014. So when you come to look at what you've done in a report, this was actually post the report, because we were getting a lot of questions from clients as to what was actually in it. And when you draw a structured diagram, you find that you may have split things up according to, you've written about inks, you've written about the different countries, the print processes, the materials, the segments. And the double line is, it's broken down by segment, sub-segment to region and individual country. But we haven't broken down by inks to regions, and we have broken down by materials and region. And then people will come along and ask about how is image quality a function of segments that you have in textiles, and how is run length a function of the segment, or segment a function of run length. We haven't done that in this report, but these lines tell you what we have actually broken down to. So in the future, I want to have more circles on the diagram and make sure that we cross-reference everything, because I think there's a lot of insight into doing some of these things that people have asked for. So that was just a sort of a health check on the report before we get going. So by way of introduction, digital textiles, as you know, a global market. There are key countries such as Italy, Turkey, Brazil, and China, up and coming, India, and so on. And in terms of participants, we find about 20 significant suppliers of inks companies that we talk to, of which 5 are leading players, are very much at the top of the pile, taking most of the revenue. Those guys are very conservative about their what revenues they have, and it's broken down into quite complex buckets of different ink types, which I'll come to. But you see a list there: reactive, acid, dispersed dye, dye sub, and so on. Within the printer manufacturers, that's even more fragmented. There are about 50 players that we talk to, or that we're aware of. Displays is more concentrated in soft signage. You have a wide range of machine productivities and costs. Obviously, industrial roll-to-roll, much more productive than a single Platen station. And I noticed at the exhibition today, the Platen side of things is really being pushed as you have many Platen D2G systems which are on carousels and so on. So you have up to 8 or even 12 round in circles and so on. So they're increasing the productivity that way. Segmentation. On the vendor side, people talk about entry-level machines. They talk about then going to mid-market and then ratcheting people up to the high-end industrial, or at least from entry to mid-market. And these, again, have vastly different productivities. And then what about segmentation by what are we actually printing on? Is it just a roll of fabric? Has it been cut into sheets ready to be printed? Or is it a finished garment as you get in direct to DCG? And that's something which people who've been buying the report have said, we need to divide it into 3 rather than 2. Let's have a cut sheet section, which is not in this report. And I hope we'll do that next time. So getting onto the segments, people talk about real segments, which are the garments, household, and technical, which is other, basically. And then displays are sort of in a world of its own with soft signage and many of the players that are switching over from flatbed UV machines and applying those to textiles now. But garments in itself is very diverse, and I'll come on to that. Obviously, at one end of the scale, fashion, unique items, and at the other end, you have sports where it's large events, and you may be trying to push that productivity capability of digital. This is how we broke it down in the report, the 4 main segments and then many sub-segments. And the report does go into detail as to, as I mentioned in the report structure slide, what are the values and coverages that are printed upon in each of those areas. So let's come on to general drivers, split it into push and pull. On the push side, you obviously have increasing productivity of machines and the very high-end machines replacing whole fleets of the smaller mid-market machines. There are machines that are in the sort of 1 to 3 million euros bracket, taking over the mid-market machines of some of those key players like Mimaki and Roland and so on, where you have a 20th of the productivity. There is a move to roll. There's heads and ink improvement and specialization as the market matures. On the pull side, you have more and more creatives getting into digital printing in obviously fashion and sport, and then household. We see a whole room with HP at Printerias there now. So that's focusing and diversifying as well. And the whole print-on-demand area, which you can't miss now, is really pushing forward. And that's forcing people to change the workflow and improve the process and go to much greater efficiencies. On displays, more demand for soft signage, which, as I'll mention, is lighter. It has advantages like you can fold it up. So the whole transport side of it is much more efficient and effective. You can just take things down, put them up elsewhere and take them with you. So further drivers for adoption. I think the one at the top, I need not go any further. It's all about engagement with the end customers. There's cost-effective one-offs, samples, micro-runs, short runs. All about engagement. We hear about this in marketing in general. It's not about cold calls and sending stuff to people anymore. It's about learning and engagement and that social media side alongside what the actual products and services you're providing. And linked closely to that is a faster turnaround to the customer. People are trying to tighten the value network and the supply chains. That can have an effect on where you locate your operations, obviously. But there's a driver towards direct to X, and X here, just the fabric, the full garment, or a household product. Performance, we've noticed people going to higher colors, 8 or 12 colors, and light colors within those 12. And including white, there's a demand for that too. We get lower drop sizes, but at the other end of the scale, the high productivity machines have huge drop sizes, so using large amounts of ink. So there's a greater range of ink sizes. I think another area that's driving it is that some of the players in technology supply and in the supply chain are actually educating and doing supply chain management. And on the flip side, the end users have got greater mastery of the design technology. So it's kind of a bit of a perfect storm. And as we'll see, we predict quite a clip in the growth rate over the next 5 years or 4 years. Dye sublimation inks have exploded. That's a very high growth area. And we're seeing still the environmental side of it is a driver, and aqueous inks of good quality, and being able to use aqueous inks at speed, getting the drying time down. I won't go into detail here, obviously. We've got 2 pages of a snapshot of the drivers. I don't mind if you take a picture of that. But this is the kind of thing that the report goes into great detail on. It's quite nice to be able to see, if I take anything at all. So if we look at fashion, the trend, well, these are some examples of what you might be talking about in practice. Advantages of digital, being able to do one-offs, and that creativity and uniqueness which is prized in fashion. And then what is the opportunity if you're a business? Obviously, if I can mainstream this whole thing of one-offs or very, very short runs, something that just can't be done with plates or with screens and so on, then of course I have an opportunity. And the driver, the trend for personalization, everyone wants a different dress or shirt or whatever, they want it customized. All of these aspects. But the report goes into many, many of these. And if I show you the next page, again, it's just a snapshot, not the whole table, but it goes on for a couple of pages. I mentioned in soft signage going a trend towards foldable materials. The process is a screen and inkjet. The opportunity is to have high volumes based on dramatic imagery for interior and exterior use. And a driver there, new inkjet printers with increased performance for flexible and thicker materials. I wonder which other one we could take out. It's interesting that in the home apparel, so clothing and interiors, people are wanting multiple launches within one season, and that actually has pressure on turnaround of products. So the opportunity is by you're feeding a need or a want, which is that people want more and more seasons within one year, and again, it's consumer demand for more choice. So if I move on, just a quick slide about print engine technology. I think most people know that this is predominantly piezo drop-on-demand inkjet rather than CIJ or TIJ. Those are the key players in terms of printhead manufacturers. I was talking to one of the top Xaar guys here today, but Xaar no longer seem to have their own stands, but they tend to float about. Spectra from the US, Fuji, Dramatics now, obviously, and some players from all over the world there. It's trending towards, as I mentioned, a wider range of drop sizes and more heads per machine, more colors and options. So let's look just a couple of the charts. The fastest growing segment, again, by some margin, according to our survey, this is asking people how they see growth, how they see the market now, and how they see it growing to 2019. And the highest number we have is you've got the 4 segments I mentioned. Clothing, the fastest, getting up to nearly 1 billion square meters on its own in 2019, and displays getting up to about half that, but a somewhat slower clip. This is still very healthy compared to textiles overall, obviously, which is growing at sort of 3 or 4% with GDP globally. Household gets over 100 million for interiors. These may all be underestimates, of course. There are market mechanisms which can make things jump forward when everyone takes on a new technology, or where you look around and you see everyone else doing digital. So we can't know exactly when that's going to happen, but this appears to be what people believe in the market that are actually taking part. technical, that's other. It's things like canvases, tents, sails, and so on that are not naturally within the other brackets. I won't talk about that one. That's just an example of a table in the report, coming up to 1.6 billion square meters of digitally printed output of textiles by 2019. And the overall rate is roughly 20% compounded every year, which is why you more than double within the 5-year period. You may not have seen this one before. It's actually very difficult to do, particularly with the PIRA history, the way we break down the ink types. If we look at the processes here, aqueous solvent, eco-solvent, UV, and other. But then on this page, I've actually gone into the surveys and looked at what people said. This is by value today, or 2014. And reactive can be aqueous or solvent. Dispersed dye, generally aqueous. So it's kind of a crossover, and this is an area that we have to sort out in future reports. This is the natural digital textiles terminology for the different kinds of inks, but we're coming from a sort of sign and graphics background, so the previous slide is in those buckets that we've inherited. I'd like to move the report over to this, because this is the kind of language people use for their inks. And you can see that dispersed dye and dye sub already over 40% of the value of the market in 2014. But aqueous is the great majority, because many of the others are also within the aqueous bracket. Another nice sort of snapshot of everything. Ink volume going to, as I mentioned, no, I didn't mention, 16,000, so 16 million litres of ink sold in 2019, up from around 6 million litres today. The installed base, if you forgive this number in 2012, I think we've got this wrong. That should be down somewhere. There's been a correction. But this number of 34,000 machines doubling to 68,000 machines in the installed base, just out there, that people are selling inks and consumables to by 2019. So a very big and solid market there for repeat business. And again, this is our 1.6 million, going up from just over 600, 650 today, or 2014, up to 1.6 billion square meters of digital output. Now, something that people don't often do, and this is, I'm now speaking more as a strategy consultant for Cambridge Investment Research, because I think PIRA is more about business intelligence, but what we do when we look at an emerging market is we look at the value network. And again, you'll forgive me, there's no point taking a picture of this, because we've deliberately, this is a piece of client work on packaging. But what you do in a value network is you write down who are all the stakeholder nodes in the entire market. And then you can look at what is the flow from, or expectations of one player from another. What do these guys expect of these guys? And you can build up a network like this. In this case, we've looked at money flows on the introduction of the new technology, and that might be digital textile printing. It might be direct-to-shape printing for folding cartons on the packaging side. And it reveals who, by looking at this, you can see, if you've got a bunch of experts around the workshop, you can actually work out who are going to be the important players in the future, where are the flows of money going to, and where are they leaving. So you look at the current and future. And you can then use that to look at the value proposition for given stakeholders. And there are various metrics within the analysis of value networks, such as the number of connections, or there's another one called the eigenvector centrality. How many nodes are you between two key players? How many times does that happen? And by looking at all of those things, you can come up with the sub-network that you should look at. And as I say, it helps you, if you're an incumbent player, it helps you to develop your strategy, your logic of your strategy, to de-risk the future, to mitigate the competitors. Or if you're a new player, such as I'll say next door in an hour's time, the co-packer in digital print, in the packaging industry, may well become a key player. And you may be able to print the packaging at the factory where bottles are being filled, rather than outsourcing that at a converting factory. So it's those kinds of changes that you can see coming by this type of analysis. So I commend it to you if any of you are interested in looking at value network analysis for your situation. So just to come back to digital textiles, it's growing from a base of about 2% of the global analog digital textiles market, global textiles market. There are key drivers both on the push and pull side, so it's a sort of a bit of a perfect storm. It is a very complex market with many different ink types. Ink costs changes as a function of volume quite radically and as a function of ink type. There are many different ink speeds and again, machine speeds and costs. And the result of that is that you need to look very carefully when you're buying into digital textiles. What is the load factor you expect on the machine? What run lengths are you going to be running? And you work out your total cost of ownership or your return on investment from that, based on that spreadsheet. It's not just necessarily an intuitive thing. Some companies buy in digital just to sort of suck it and see and try it out in a corner whilst the main business carries on. And others are actually going digital and relying on that. So they need to get that calculation right. Otherwise, financially you can be in trouble. But I believe in investing in understanding the value network, especially when you have this whole engagement marketing, inbound marketing that we all have now with social media and so on. If you understand your value network, you can actually plan that side of it, as well as plan to remove the barriers to adoption and use of your products and services. So there can be a logic to it. And then, just finally, in summary, digital textiles growing strongly, 20% clip over the next 5 years, compared to analog growing much more slowly. Output, as I said, 1.6 billion square meters in 2019. Business models are changing. People are going online, print on demand, shorter turnarounds. People are wanting those more and more of the micro runs and one-offs, which are just not possible with analog printing, not cheaply anyway. And the segments are resolving and subdividing. So you may see people like Smithers PIRA writing reports on only DTG. I think I can announce that's probably in the pipeline. You may end up doing one in conjunction with HP on just household segment. So we'll end up, as the market gets more mature, you can actually focus down on individual segments. So in summary, I think technology being refined on the push side, and it's a solid opportunity for the foreseeable future. There's just an ad for the report. If anyone would like to get hold of it, contact Bill Allen. We can give you a discount now for it. And Bill Allen, I'm sure, will do the same thing if you go directly to him. And thank you very much for your attention. Please do link in there on LinkedIn. We've got an email address there and a phone number if you'd like to contact me. And thank you very much. If there are any questions, I can take those separately. Or now if you'd like to go ahead and do that. Thank you very much. Thanks.